The heat of XRO-7's twin suns bore down on the cadets as they moved through the dense alien jungle, their training mission nearing its final stretch. Ethan Voss, the only human at Sunspire Academy, wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted his grip on his rifle. His squad, a mix of elite trainees from various species, moved in tight formation, their senses sharp. The jungle was alive with strange sounds, chirps, growls, and the distant hum of unseen predators. They had been warned that this world was unpredictable, but no amount of preparation could have braced them for what came next. A sudden rustling in the undergrowth sent a jolt of adrenaline through Ethan's veins. Before he could react, a monstrous shape burst from the shadows, a biomechanical predator, its metallic limbs gleaming under the sunlight, its serrated mandibles snapping as it lunged. The squad scattered, weapons raised, but the creature was fast, impossibly fast. A sharp pain exploded in Ethan's side as something pierced his flesh, a jagged, venomous spike shot from the creature's tail. He stumbled back, vision blurring for a split second, but his instincts kept him moving. The squad fired in unison, their combined assault tearing through the creature's armored body until it collapsed in a smoking heap. Ethan dropped to one knee, pressing a hand against his wound. A burning sensation spread through his veins like wildfire, his muscles locking up as if his own body was turning against him. He barely registered the voices around him shouted orders, concerned murmurs, but then the squad's medic, an Elthian named Cyril, was kneeling beside him, scanning the wound with her advanced medical device. Her species was renowned for their mastery of healing, their knowledge of anatomy spanning across countless civilizations. If anyone could help him, it was her. Her expression darkened as she examined the data on her holodisplay. The venom has already spread. It is lethal. Her voice, usually calm and composed, carried a note of finality. His body cannot withstand this. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The other cadets exchanged uncertain glances. An Elthian medic's diagnosis was absolute. If she said it was fatal, then there was no hope. Even Rinkai, the Felraxi warrior who had always respected Ethan's tenacity, looked away, his sharp claws tightening into fists. It was an unspoken truth in the galaxy. Humans were fragile, weaker than most species. Their biology was unremarkable, their endurance limited. No one doubted Ethan's spirit, but spirit alone couldn't fight against something science deemed impossible to survive. Ethan, however, refused to accept it. His breaths came in short, ragged gasps, but his mind remained clear. He had seen humans overcome impossible odds before, not because they were the strongest nor the fastest, but because they never knew when to quit. His body was shutting down, pain pulsing through his every nerve, yet something deep inside him fought back. His heart pounded against his ribcage, his immune system reacting with a desperation that even the Elthian's medical scans couldn't predict. The venom that should have already begun the process of breaking him down was meeting resistance, his body adapting in real time. The squad moved quickly, carrying him back to their transport ship, but even as they secured him in the med bay, Cyril shook her head. His vitals are unstable. His system is burning itself out trying to fight the poison. He won't last long. Hours passed. The Academy was alerted of the situation, and whispers of Ethan's condition spread through the ranks. Sunspire Academy had seen cadets fall before, and while every loss was unfortunate, this one felt different. Ethan had earned respect, despite being the lone human among superior species. He was determined, stubborn, and always the last to back down from a challenge. His instructors, his friends, everyone who knew him felt the weight of the news. But as the Academy prepared for the inevitable, something strange was happening inside Ethan's body. His fever spiked, his muscles convulsed, but he wasn't slipping away. Instead, his vitals, though chaotic, showed something unexpected. Cyril monitored his condition with growing disbelief. The venom, which should have been tearing through his organs, was instead being fought at a cellular level. His immune system, unlike anything she had seen, wasn't surrendering, it was adapting. Humans were known for their ability to adjust to hostile environments, but she had never considered that their biology could apply that same principle internally. Ethan drifted between consciousness and darkness, his body drenched in sweat, but a thought burned in his mind like a beacon: survive. He had been through worse. Pain was temporary. He wasn't done yet. The Academy could call it impossible. The medic could call it fatal, but he wasn't going to die here. His body had already decided that. Word of Ethan's condition spread through Sunspire Academy like wildfire. By the time his squad's transport arrived at the Academy's medical bay, the news had already reached instructors, cadets, and high-ranking officials. The only human in the Academy had been declared fatally poisoned by an Elthian medic, one of the most advanced healers in the galaxy. To the other species, this meant only one thing: there was no hope. Elthians never made mistakes in medical matters. Their knowledge spanned thousands of years and countless species. If Cyril had diagnosed Ethan's condition as fatal, then he was already considered lost. Inside the Academy, conversations turned into murmurs of quiet grief. The humans were a newly accepted species into the wider galactic community, still proving their worth among the elite warriors, tacticians, and scientists of other civilizations. Ethan had been the first of his kind to join Sunspire Academy, and despite early doubts, he had earned the respect of those around him through sheer determination. He was the cadet who never backed down, who pushed himself beyond his limits when others had already surrendered to exhaustion. He wasn't the strongest, nor the fastest, but he was relentless. And now, the Academy was preparing to say goodbye. In the Grand Hall, a group of instructors discussed the situation in low voices. Commander Virek, a towering Excelthar with gleaming black scales, folded his arms and sighed. It is unfortunate. The human fought well during his time here. But even his endurance has its limits. Beside him, an elder Voran tactician named Zyrek nodded solemnly. It was inevitable. Humans are adaptable, but their biology is fragile. There was nothing anyone could do. Across the room, Ethan's fellow cadets stood in uneasy silence. Rinkai, the Felraxi warrior who had fought alongside Ethan in countless training exercises, paced restlessly. His sharp claws flexed, his fur bristling with frustration. He had seen Ethan survive impossible situations before. It didn't feel right to accept this so easily. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Ethan lay motionless on the examination table, his skin pale, his body drenched in sweat. Monitors displayed chaotic readings, his vitals fluctuating between critical and stable, as if his body itself refused to decide whether to give in or fight back. Cyril, the Elthian medic, stood beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the data. She had seen death countless times before, had accepted it as a part of existence. But something about this case unsettled her. The poison should have already shut down his organs. His body should have collapsed under the strain. And yet, despite all medical logic, Ethan's condition was not following the expected pattern. His immune system was attacking the venom in ways she had never seen before, as if it was learning, adapting, evolving. The other medical staff prepared for the inevitable. They arranged reports, informed Academy officials, and began drafting statements for the record formal documentation of the human cadet's passing. It was procedure, a necessary formality, but Cyril hesitated. She watched the monitor closely, noticing a pattern in the chaos. His heart rate would spike, his body temperature would rise, his blood chemistry would fluctuate each time. He seemed to be on the brink of collapse, yet every time he pulled back from the edge. It was as if his body refused to accept defeat, as if something deep within him was rejecting the very idea of death. Hours passed. Outside the medical bay, cadets gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Some shared stories of Ethan's stubbornness, how he had pushed himself through brutal training sessions, how he had refused to quit, even when his body was failing him. Others simply waited, unsure of what else to do. In the Academy's command center, messages were already being prepared to be sent back to Earth. The humans had lost one of their own in the Academy's ranks, and they would have to be informed. The weight of responsibility hung heavy in the air. But inside Ethan's body, a different battle was taking place. His fever burned hotter, his muscles twitched, his veins pulsed with a force that defied logic. The venom had spread to every corner of his system, yet instead of succumbing, his immune system was adapting. Cells that should have been destroyed were instead reinforcing themselves. His body was treating the poison as if it were an invader to be conquered, not a force to surrender to. His biology was rewriting the rules of survival, pushing itself beyond the limits of dangerously high, was not breaking him down, it was burning through the poison. His system was in overdrive, pushing itself to a limit that no other species she had encountered had ever reached. This was not the slow process of healing. This was something else entirely. This was defiance. Outside, Rinkai stopped pacing, his sharp ears twitching as he caught movement from the medbay. He turned just in time to see Cyril emerge, her usually composed expression replaced with something close to disbelief. The cadets watching her immediately fell silent. She looked at them for a long moment before finally speaking. "He is still fighting." The words sent a ripple through the gathered crowd. No one had expected that. No one had thought it possible. But deep down, those who knew Ethan, those who had seen the fire in his eyes during every challenge, every impossible task, felt something stir within them. Maybe, just maybe, the human wasn't finished yet. The academy remained in a state of uneasy silence. News of Ethan's unexpected struggle against death had spread through the ranks like a whispered legend, something too unbelievable to accept, yet impossible to ignore. Sunspire Academy had prepared for mourning, for the quiet acceptance that the human cadet had fought his last battle. But now, the whispers had changed. The impossible was happening. Inside the medical bay, Cyril stood motionless, her glowing Elfian eyes scanning the data in front of her. Every logical part of her mind told her this was a delay, a prolonging of the inevitable. The venom had no cure. It had taken down warriors far stronger than Ethan. His body should have collapsed long ago. Yet, the readings told a different story. His cells weren't deteriorating, they were changing. His immune system had somehow begun attacking the poison at a speed far beyond what was considered biologically possible. She had spent years studying the healing properties of different species, but never had she seen a body react like this. Ethan's breathing was shallow but steady. His skin, once drained of color, was now regaining warmth. His temperature had spiked past dangerous levels, yet instead of shutting down, his system was stabilizing. Every time his vitals had reached the edge of failure, they had pulled back, as if something inside him refused to accept defeat. His heart had not slowed, it had strengthened. His blood was fighting a war against the venom, adapting at a pace that no other species had ever shown. Outside, the Academy's cadets gathered in small groups, exchanging theories, doubts, and cautious hope. Rinkai paced back and forth, his claws clicking against the floor. His instincts as a warrior told him to trust what he saw, and what he saw was something no one had expected: a human who refused to die. He had fought alongside Ethan before, had seen him endure things that should have broken him. This, however, was different. This was not just willpower. This was something beyond that. The instructors, skeptical but intrigued, reviewed Cyril's reports with furrowed brows. Commander Virek tapped his talons against the table as he read the latest update. "This is not possible," he muttered. "A human body should not be capable of this level of adaptation." Zyrek, the Voron tactician, leaned back with a thoughtful expression. "Perhaps we have underestimated them," he said. "We have studied their technology, their strategies. But their biology, this is something else entirely." Inside the med bay, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind caught between fevered dreams and sharp flashes of reality. He felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, the burning heat of his own body fighting to keep him alive. He remembered the moment he was struck by the venomous spike, the feeling of cold dread that had tried to creep into his thought. But deeper than the pain, deeper than the sickness, there was something stronger, an instinct that refused to let go. His body, his very cells, were pushing back against death itself. Hours turned into a full cycle, and Cyril remained by his side, monitoring every shift, every impossible sign of recovery. She had seen species with accelerated healing, with regenerative abilities that could repair even the worst injuries. But Ethan was different. He wasn't healing in the way that made sense. His body was adapting. It was almost as if the venom, instead of killing him, had triggered something within him, forcing his system to evolve at an unnatural speed. She had once believed that humans were fragile creatures, that their resilience was purely mental. Now, she wasn't so sure. Then, as the Academy braced for either a miracle or an inevitable collapse, Ethan's body did something that defied every expectation. His eyes opened. The first breath he took was slow, controlled, no longer weak or labored. His muscles twitched, backslash. Whisper. Ethan swallowed, his throat dry, his head pounding, but there was clarity in his gaze. "Guess nobody told my body that," he muttered, a small smirk forming despite the exhaustion weighing him down. The doors to the medbay hissed open as the news reached the academy. Cadets and instructors alike stood frozen at the sight of the impossible Ethan, sitting up, alive. Rinkai was the first to step forward, his piercing eyes narrowing. "You're supposed to be dead," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. Ethan let out a weak chuckle. "Yeah, well, I changed my mind." The silence in the room was deafening, as the reality of what had just happened settled over them all. The human had survived something no one had ever come back from. He had beaten a poison that had claimed warriors far stronger, far more biologically advanced. The Academy had already prepared for mourning, for the loss of one of their own. Instead, they were witnessing something entirely new, an undeniable truth about humanity itself. Ethan had done the impossible. And in that moment, every species in the Academy realized something unsettling. Humans weren't just resilient. They were something else entirely. Something unpredictable. Something that could not be broken, even when science and logic said otherwise. And as Ethan leaned back, his breath steady, his heart strong, one thought burned in the minds of everyone watching. If one human could defy death itself, what else were they truly capable of? The moment Ethan defied death, the Academy was no longer the same. What had once been a place of mourning had now turned into a center of fascination, fear, and disbelief. Cyril, the Elfian medic who had seen countless species fall to injuries and poisons, now stood in silent astonishment, staring at the human who should have been nothing more than another tragic loss. But there he was, alive, stable, and recovering at an impossible speed. Every test, every scan, every recorded biological response made no sense. It wasn't just that Ethan had survived. It was that he had done so in a way that defied the very rules of medicine. The medbay, once quiet in anticipation of a funeral, was now filled with scientists, medical officers, and high-ranking officials from across the Academy. Monitors flickered with data, alien specialists murmured in hushed but frantic tones, and yet at the center of it all, Ethan sat up, stretching his sore limbs, oblivious to the fact that he had become the most important biological anomaly in galactic history. Commander Vierik had arrived the moment the reports became official. His dark scales shimmered under the cold medical lights as he read through the data. His piercing eyes, which had seen countless battles and the fall of entire worlds, narrowed as he processed what had occurred. "This should not be possible," he muttered, his voice heavy with something close to unease. "Humans are adaptable, but this?" He gestured toward Ethan, who, despite the lingering fatigue in his limbs, was already moving far better than he should have. "This is beyond anything we have documented." Rinkai, Ethan's closest friend and often his fiercest rival in training, stood nearby, arms crossed, his tail flicking in thought. "We have seen him push past limits before," the Felraxi warrior muttered. "But this is different." His body fought the venom like it was a battle, and it won. It didn't just heal. It changed. Cyril, still trying to piece together the impossibility of what she had witnessed, approached Ethan cautiously. Her glowing eyes scanned the readings once more, but the numbers refused to change. His vitals were strong, his body temperature normal, his cells different. "Your immune system did not simply resist the venom," she said, her voice more fascinated than concerned. "It adapted. It rewrote itself to counter the threat. This is not healing in the traditional sense. This is something else entirely." Ethan, who had spent more than enough time being poked, scanned, and observed, sighed. "I get it. I was supposed to die, but I didn't. Now everyone's treating me like some kind of medical miracle." He glanced at the hovering screen beside his bed, showing complex biological data he didn't fully understand. But what does this actually mean? Cyril hesitated before responding, as if even saying it out loud would make it more unbelievable. It means that medical science, as we know it, has just changed. The weight of those words settled over the room. Every species had their own strengths, their own ways of surviving. Some had regenerative properties, some had enhanced immune systems, others relied on technology to keep them alive. But never had they encountered a species whose body could adapt in real time, rewriting its biological processes to counter an unknown threat. Humans were supposed to be one of the weaker species, limited by their physiology, surviving only through intelligence and ingenuity. But now they had proof that there was something much more dangerous hidden within them, something that not even humans themselves had fully understood. It wasn't long before the news spread beyond the Academy. Medical researchers from across the galaxy demanded access to the data. Some were fascinated, others were terrified. If a human could survive an incurable venom by sheer biological defiance, what else could they endure? What limits did their bodies actually have? The implications stretched far beyond Ethan himself. If his body could do this, then perhaps all humans had the potential. Perhaps their adaptability was not just a survival trait, but an evolutionary advantage unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The realization sent ripples through every medical institution, every research facility, and every governing body that had once believed humans to be predictable. They had always assumed that humans relied on technology to overcome their physical weaknesses. But now they saw the truth: humans were not weak at all. They were something far more unpredictable. Ethan, meanwhile, was less concerned about rewriting medical science and more interested in standing up without falling over. His muscles were sore, his head ached, but his body felt stronger. He could feel the difference, as if something deep inside him had shifted. He wasn't just recovering, he was evolving. And the idea of that sent a chill down his spine. As the Academy struggled to make sense of what had happened, one undeniable fact stood above all others: humanity had just proven something terrifying. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. But they were something much worse for those who opposed them. They were survivors. And no matter how impossible the odds, no matter how certain their defeat seemed, they would always find a way to fight back. And if one human could do this, what would happen when the rest of the galaxy realized what they were truly capable of? The story of Ethan's survival spread beyond the Academy like wildfire. What had once been whispered as an impossible recovery was now spoken of as something far greater: a legend. Across the galactic sectors, in high-ranking medical facilities and war councils alike, the question arose: how did a human defy certain death? Theories emerged, but none could explain what had happened. Ethan's body had done something unnatural, something that no known species had achieved. It had rewritten its own rules, adapted in real time, and fought back against an unstoppable venom. The impossible had become reality, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that they had never truly understood humanity. At Sunspire Academy, Ethan found himself the center of attention in ways he had never expected. Warriors who once considered him weak now studied him with cautious respect. Scientists who had dismissed humanity as physically inferior now flooded the Academy, desperate to study his recovery. Some sought to understand, others to control. But all of them, whether they admitted it or not, were afraid. Commander Virek, an experienced tactician who had once called humans determined but fragile, stood in the Academy's command center, staring at the latest reports. His sharp eyes traced the medical analysis, yet no matter how many times he read it, the conclusion remained the same: Ethan's body had not just survived, it had evolved. The venom should have shut down his organ. Instead, his immune system had adapted at an unprecedented rate, learning from the poison and countering it like a battlefield strategist analyzing an enemy's moves. "This changes everything," Virek murmured, his claws tapping against the metal table. Humans were always seen as survivors, but this is something else entirely. Rinkai, Ethan's Felraxi friend and combat rival, leaned against the wall, his sharp eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and wariness. "He didn't just survive," Rinkai said. "He refused to die." I have fought beside him before. I have seen humans push beyond limits they should not cross. I thought it was just their stubbornness, their willpower." He exhaled deeply. "But now I wonder. Maybe it's something deeper. Maybe survival is not just a choice for them. Maybe it's something written into their very existence." Inside the medical bay, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, stretching his arms, testing his muscles. The soreness was fading fast. Too fast. He could feel it, the difference in his body. His breathing was smoother, his thoughts clearer. He had felt death creeping up on him, but something inside him had pushed back. It wasn't just survival. It was something primal, something instinctive. He had been at the edge of death, but he had not fallen. And now he felt stronger for it. Cyril, the Elthian medic who had been by his side through it all, observed him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "Your body shouldn't be functioning this well," she said, her voice betraying her struggle between fear and fascination. "You're not just recovering, Ethan. You're improving. I don't know how, but your system learned from the venom. It adapted, fought back, and now," she gestured at the readings floating above the medical display. "You are stronger than before. Your endurance, your immune response, even your muscle regeneration is accelerating beyond normal human levels." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, letting out a small chuckle. "So what? I'm some kind of science experiment now?" Cyril didn't smile. "You are proof of something the galaxy has never seen before." The weight of her words settled over him. He had always known humans were tough, but this was different. This wasn't just about being stubborn or refusing to give up. This was something deeper. Something no one, not even humans themselves, had fully understood. And the galaxy was starting to take notice. Outside the Academy walls, whispers turned into warnings. If humans could do this, if their bodies could adapt in ways no other species could, what else were they capable of? Could they become immune to every toxin, every biological weapon? Could they push past physical limits in ways even they hadn't realized? And if one human could do this, how long before the rest of their species discovered the truth? The Academy's leaders convened in secret meetings, debating the implications. Some saw an opportunity. A species that could overcome biological threats like no other could become an asset in wars, in survival missions, in dangerous experiments that no other race could endure. Others, however, saw a threat. If humans could evolve past weaknesses, if they could become stronger after facing death itself, how long before they became unstoppable? Ethan, unaware of the growing debates across the galaxy, stood outside on the Academy's observation deck, staring at the distant stars. He could feel the change within him, but he didn't know what it meant yet. He had always believed in pushing forward, in never giving up. But now, he wondered, was that just human nature? Rinkai joined him, standing silently before speaking. "You've done something no one thought possible," he said, his tone unreadable. "They are afraid of you now." Ethan smirked. "Let them be." Rinkai studied him for a long moment before nodding. Maybe they should be. As the stars shined above them, the legend of human resilience had begun to take root. It would spread through the galaxy, whispered in halls of power, studied in medical labs, feared in war councils. The truth was no longer avoidable. Humans were not the strongest, nor the most advanced. But they were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. And nothing, not poison, not fate, not even death itself, could keep them down.